Everything you ever thought was logical and obvious and correct is almost certainly wrong. Reality, when you get right down to it, doesn't actually exist. It's all a fiction created by the unconscious part of your consciousness, that niggling, spiteful bit in your self-awareness of which you weren't aware. Granted, it sounds like some sort of badly thought-out oxymoron, an impossible nonsense in a third-rate audio drama. But believe it or not, it's all been proven scientifically. Go and look it up on Wikipedia if you don't believe us. Unfortunately, most people can't be bothered listening to what those boring old farts in the physics departments are trying to tell us, or to these audio adventures come to that. The phenomenon is known amongst the more intelligent and scientifically curious as quantum strangeness.
Shut the damn door, Polly. There's a god-awful draft.
Sorry, just looking at the Emerald City logs. You get a magnificent view of it from up here, although it appears to be closing in rapidly.
It's the Celestial City, you frumpy rhino, and the wind's blowing me script all over the console, which is why we're about to crash.
The Lawrence Pendlebury Audio Adventures for the Deaf, Episode 6, The Dark Side of Eternity.
His name is Lawrence Pendlebury. He watches too much 60s telly. He keeps buggering with space the lyrics of the song don't rhyme, and for half the flames are high. The lands don't scan properly.
The story is so far. In the beginning there was darkness. Then Lawrence Pendlebury and Polly Jenkins happened. Now the darkness has a puncture and time is leaking out all over the place. Following a short stint in hell, our accident-prone heroes crash-landed in a marketplace just outside the Celestial City in a last-ditch attempt to ask God to help them put everything back the way it was. Not that he's been exactly over-generous on that score in the past, but it has to be worth a shot.
This is heaven, is it? It's more like gassing on a wet Thursday. Even the sheep look drizzled and bored, and it takes a lot to bore a sheep, as bestiality Higginson with burnt thatch farm pillars.
I'll just check my interstellar GPS, which I fortuitously keep in my waistcoat pocket, along with a bag of Werther's Originals, my contract with Clockwork Coconut Productions, and the Zippo lighter. Apparently this is purgatory, which explains a lot, and those aren't sheep. They're dead Facebook users, although how you can tell the difference between them and the live ones is anybody's guess. The entrance to the Celestial City is over there by the gift shop.
Here's a question. If the afterlife is pretty much a continuation of the one before it, then why do we have to die in the first place? Seems a lot of hassle if there's basically no difference between the two.
Because religion's a load of bollocks, Polly. It's just Father Christmas, who the more battered listeners will remember we met a couple of episodes ago for adults. Retarded adults at that, but anybody who needs a book to tell them the difference between right and wrong will believe anything. In the real universe, people just reproduce and die so that the human race can evolve, and we'll keep on evolving until we've got it right, until there's no more racism, no more greed, misogyny, petty elitism, stupidity, homophobia, religion, sadism or selfishness, or the crankies.
Well, that's it then. We're screwed. We're all going to keep on dying forever.
Stop right there, Earthlings. We are the cherubim, what guard the impassable gates of Eden. For some unexplainable reason, we have bandaged beards, stubby wings that are about as much juice as knitted condoms, and stunted bulls' bodies. And we can fire deadly lasers from our eyes. Not exactly in keeping with the peace-loving Christian ethos, I know, but seriously, don't fuck with us.
I thought cherubs were those hideous babies buzzing around Jimmy Savile's head.
A common misconception, not unlike the aforementioned overweight gargolic babies themselves. They're actually known as putties.
Yeah, silly putties we call them, don't we, Gary? Thought that was quite funny myself. I was going to send it to Giles Brandle scriptwriters, but we've been stuck on guard duty for the last 5,000 years. So, as you can imagine, it's a bit tricky getting down to the post office.
Shut up, Beryl, and stop undermining our authority. Now, cower, pathetic mortals, and explain to us in no more than 500 words, using appropriate adaptations wherever possible, what you require here at the dreadful gates of paradise. And you'd better not be Jehovah's bloody witnesses, otherwise it's human centipede time.
I'll have a 99 if you've got one.
Forgive us, divine guards, but we were wondering if God wants to play out. We've ruptured the temporal sphere, you see, and with a bit of luck, he's got some sort of omnipotent puncture repair kit on the shelf in his celestial outhouse.
Ha! No mortal may enter the kingdom of Yahweh unless they solve the riddle of the cherubim first. But be warned, you bucket of putty excrement. Should you answer incorrectly, you'll be reduced to a pile of ash, and then we'll gobble you right up, because we like our food well done.
With Heinz's delicious Thousand Island dressing, which, now that I've mentioned it during the public broadcast, I'm hoping they'll send me a crate off, because it doesn't go off quick in this.
That's a bit harsh, isn't it? Not to mention a rather odd method of weeding out potential terrorists from genuine devotees. The
According to Wikipedia, the riddle of the cherubim was first recorded in ancient Greek mythology when some bloke called Rex Oedipus went looking for some bird called Wendy whom he'd met at the Boar's Head, or something. Apparently, the riddle asks, what crawls on 4 legs when there's toddlers about, stands on 2 over brunch, and grows a 3rd one into Stotage, or whatever. Given nobody listens to this stuff, it's hardly worth doing proper research. Anyway, the answer's Rolf Harris.
That's the legend of the sphincter.
It's Sphinx, you inflated testicle, but in essence, you're correct. Those bastard Egyptians plagiarized it. So, what's the answer?
Hold your horses right there, Jedwood. Back in 2 shakes of a putty's neck.
34 and 2/3 of a second later.
That's Laura's old semi-automatic plasma gun, available from most good hardware stores and branches of Boots in the year 2313, isn't it?
Yep. Sometimes the simplest answers are the best. This scene was going on for way too long. Now, let's get inside this dump for our final dramatic confrontation with God before our listener dies of boredom.
It was back in Princeton in 1964 that a doctoral candidate called, somewhat embarrassingly, Hugh Everett III first proposed the parallel universe theory. At least he did in this universe. The theory states that the number of realities superimposed over our own is infinite, each one subtly different from the last. Therefore, it stands to reason that every imaginable universe exists somewhere, even Lawrence and Polly's, which raises the difficult question, exactly who are they addressing when they break the 4th wall? Also means, when you stop to think about it, that there must be a universe where parallel universes don't exist, which sort of buggers that idea up. However, it's the only explanation we've got to justify the nonsensical building belonging to the 80-foot-high Christian-Jewish god in which Lawrence and Polly now find themselves trespassing. So it's going to have to run with it.
It's a bit over the top and camp, isn't it? This is what I imagine Lib Archer's closet to look like. What gives with all the statues of Cliff Richard? It would be so bad if they weren't all new.
This corridor's longer than Nick Nose's posing pouch. I feel like Brackett buckling Chigley on his never-ending search for Lord Belbra's slippers.
You mean stereotypically lower middle class and unconvincing?
Here we go, Polly, my misshapen pear drop. We finally arrived at God's kitchen. Impressive, isn't it? There's God himself, towering above us, complete with traditional toga, the sort of Forestry Commission-owned beard you'd more normally find growing between an Edwardian porn star's thighs, baking a planet in the oven, as per standard issue allegedly cutting-edge American cartoons.
He must have dropped one of his half-baked asteroids on his foot. It's got a weird limp. So much for infallibility. Either that or his wife was to waste up his holy crap.
The Sisters of Little Mercy at my prep school always said he moved in a mysterious way.
Oi, mate, we've boggled up the temporal sphere. We need to borrow one of your sticky plasters.
Damn, too much hydrogen in the mix again. Pity that. I rather like the frosted poles on that one.
He can't hear us, or can't be bothered, so there's nothing new there then.
Right, here's the plan, Polly, me hirsute sea slug. We'll climb the skirting board, lasso a tap, haul ourselves onto the draining board, navigate the enormous playback, shinny up the brush that resembles Nigel Kennedy sat on a hedgehog sticking out of that giant milk bottle, and then try to attract his attention somehow. Good job I've got this rope and grappling hook in my waistcoat pocket.
Exactly whose waistcoat was that? Say, wasn't it?
Lawrence and Polly's exciting adventure in God's Sink, recorded in omniphonic mega audio surround sound, featuring Jeremy Clarkson as the punch-throwing Brillo pad, Julian Clary as the innuendo spouting teapot, and Boris Johnson as the massive, soggy sponge.
Hand me the nose crampons, Polly, you loady old beetroot.
If I can just get a grip on this massive busted teaspoon way down the back of the door.
Watch out, Polly, me old inflamed gallbladder. For some reason, there's a urinal cake rolling towards us Indiana Jones style at phenomenal speed.
Actually, it wasn't as exciting as I'd hoped. Not to worry. 33 1/3 short minutes later, our pioneering heroes reached the summit of God's gigantic egg whisk, where, using a thimble with the whole board in the top for a megaphone, they attempted mankind's first ever direct communication with their creator.
Oh yeah, Mr. Jehovah, can we have a quick word?
Good me, what in my own name are you supposed to be? Some sort of cockroaches, only with less obvious intelligence and no fashion sense.
Good morning, Mr. Christmas. We're representatives of the human race. Well, I am. Not sure what she is. We've come to ask a rather unconventional favour of you. Not something we'd normally request of an obviously invented deity, but we've run out of options, and given the dual nature of quantum mechanics and the fact that reality appears to be whatever the subconscious wants it to be, we thought it might be worth a bash.
Representative, what was that, you human race? Oh yes, I vaguely remember you lot. Annoying little bastards, always squabbling. Told you to be more pleasant once, and you spent the next millennium blowing each other to bits because you couldn't agree on the definition of the word. I abandoned you lot centuries ago, left Jesus, the oldest in charge. You reckon he couldn't gather you all together in peace and harmony for the rest of eternity? Arrogant little shit. How's that going, by the way?
Not great. right.
No, I suspected as much. Spent too much time with prostitutes and tax collectors getting stoned out of his psychedelic hippie head. Reckoned they were the ones who needed the most work. If you want some tough nuts to crack, I told him you could try having a go at the anti-Semites. Leave the slags and the Tories alone. You don't know where they've been. Oddly enough, he didn't listen.
Given that I'll almost certainly never get this opportunity again, I'll repeat the question I asked earlier. How come everybody has to die in order to be reborn? We reached heaven, or whatever it's called, quite easily in the twatter without any of that unnecessary suffering or stuff, although the same probably can't be said for the listener.
Oh, well, you wouldn't understand. There's no doubt your pedophile Sunday school teacher, Mr. Kerwin, told you when you were a kid, because of your limited brain power, the ways of God are much too complicated to comprehend.
Try me.
Fair enough. I write your stories, you see. The stories that govern your inadequate, frustration-fraught lives. Brief synopses on the whole, except when it's really good ones, such as Stuart Hall's. It's up to the individuals to fill in all the words and grammar and stuff. Have you any idea how difficult that is? Millions of individual stories, all subtly different, yet still vaguely interesting. The trouble is, I could never come up with a decent ending, so I tend to kill everyone off. It's lazy, I know, but I'm God and I can do what I like. What are you going to do about it? Well, this seems like an appropriate moment to interrupt the plot with a short dissertation on the true nature of God. No other reason than the previous scene was starting to get monotonous. People often wrongly assume that God created mankind. Any right-thinking individual, however, would quickly realize that it was mankind who created God. In order to impose their right-wing legislation on the oppressed masses, to justify their greed for money and power, and for something to do on Sunday mornings, which tend to be boring at the best of times. Put it simply, God is much like Boris Johnson, an amusing, mildly malevolent and distracting character, worshipped by millions of brain-dead idiots, so the real bastards in charge can keep on getting away with murder.
So are you going to help us out or what? I've got a steak and kidney pie in the oven and time's getting on.
No, I don't think so.
The universe is ending. Everything you've ever accomplished is going to be swept away in one distorted, sonorous fart, downloaded from free SFX Co UK, including yourself.
Yeah, so I don't have to justify my motives to the likes of you, which is perhaps as well considering the amount of pointless shit I've caused over the century. However, thanks for bringing this state of affairs to my attention. I'll just unleash the 4 assholes of the apostrophe. My stenographer's a bit arthritic. It was a major typo on her part, with no doubt some ridiculous consequences later on. But what can you do? And then get back to giving cancer to children. But everyone needs a hobby. At that very moment, more or less, it's difficult to be certain, given the relativity of space-time, but you know what I mean, somewhere across the merciless, eternal wastelands of the firmament, perched on a rocky outcrop in the shape of Bruce Forsyth's chin, the 4 assholes of the apostrophe, along with their donkeys, are raising one last pint in salute to creation.
Well, lads, this is it. The big boss has just been in touch. Doomsday's finally on. Is the apostrophe firmly secured on the cart?
David Cameron, otherwise known, due to an arthritic typographical error, as pesticide, the harbinger of spume, dead pigs' heads, and self-abuse.
Oh, save the Norris fashion game, you old utopian chumster. What? What's that incessant blubbing noise? Is that you, Osborne, you self-righteous inbred? Stick that chin out and give us some spunk, old man. Oh, is it stuck out? In that case, hoist up your Adam's apple.
Boris Johnson, also known as Wart, destroyer of the European Union, bringer of party packs, and a generally unpleasant, fat, lecherous bastard.
Fellow Nazis, the hunt is on. Let us ride in our bright red tunics with riding crops towards mayhem, torture, and villainy. Today, sisters, we shall unleash the apostrophe on all mankind and fill their souls with pluralism and possessiveness.
And Duncan Smith, formerly known as Fanny, now simply known as Twat.
Lads, the cart wheels are stuck in the mud. Could one of you give me a hand? Lads? Anybody there?
So that's it, is it? The death of mankind, the destruction of the universe. No more Gumballjacks, no more Keith Lemon, so every clown, I suppose.
Pretty much. Although I leave you with one last highly ambiguous clue about how all this can yet be avoided, because I'm that sort of god. Childish, really, but there you go. What help you seek lies at the very edge, where the flat truth gushes forth, possibly fifth.
What's that supposed to mean? Obviously something we're not supposed to find out until the next episode.
Right, listen up. You have not only been suffering from galloping hemorrhoids, but also the news headlines, Episode 6, Prometheus released from his gimp suit, starring in order of expenses, Carol Porter as Frank Kelly, Terry Sedgwick as David Bowie, Carrie Black as Alan Rickman, and Brian Hughes as Terry Wogan. The incidental music was
was snuck out of Kevin MacLeod's studio up Terry Cedric's sweater, and the sound effects were created by hitting a retired Foley artist from Blake 7 repeatedly around the back of the head with a squeaky hammer. Is this the end of everything? Can Lawrence and Polly decipher God's last message and save the day? Presumably yes. Otherwise, the next episode is going to be even more boring than normal.